Look, there you go. We should be good now.
Start over from the beginning. All right. Welcome back to another edition of Campfire Chats. I am Chris Sand, the National Sales Manager, along with Mike Maglin. We're practicing our social distancing still. As you can see, we have a different chair today. We have the Masters chair kind of reflecting on the event that we lost at Augusta National. It kind of holds a place in our heart. We know a few people who have been down there. Our executive producer who's back with us, Lori Mraz, has been down there, I think a couple of times. So we're fortunate to have some apparel that we kind of sport proudly, and we're kind of saddened today that we don't get to watch the Masters this week. You can see we still have our blue chairs. We'll go back to our Campfire Chat blue chairs next week, but we thought we'd change it up a little bit, maybe kind of pique your interest and grab your attention. So with that, Mike, you want to get into the book?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so this week's book is The Chamber of Bowling Secrets by Susie Minshew. If you go to turbogrips.com, you can find chapter 1 on our website. You can take a read at that, kind of get a perspective of what the book's about, but she kind of draws you in really quickly in chapter 1 because the last 2 pages has a unique chart, a unique graph that kind of got me going, kind of kept me reading a little bit further and drew my interest into what was going on. So getting right into the book, I think one of the things that Susie does is she's kind of changed my perspective on practice. One of the things that I remember in the book that she talked about later on was never hit the reset button. In practice, never hit the reset button. Even if you're not going to shoot that spare, maybe you're making a ball change, but don't hit that reset button, which I think is a good lesson for all of our high school bowlers and our collegiate bowlers. Something that I'm going to instill in my daughter. My daughter does a pretty good job at shooting every single spares, but at one point in time that drove me nuts because I wanted her to try and get the perspective of getting in rhythm and working on one thing versus maybe we're trying to play a junior gold shot where we got to play, up the lanes and trying to get, she talked a lot about follow-throughs and things like that, trying to get your swing in line. But I think she really changed my perspective as far as practice goes with that chart.
Yeah, and one thing, since we do have our Masters chair out, I think a golf analogy is you don't just go to the driving range and hit the driver the entire time. Just as you don't practice throwing strikes the entire time, make sure that you're practicing your spares. One of the things I picked up from the first chapter that she kind of mentioned in there was feeling different. And not always being comfortable. I know, especially when I practice with Chris, sometimes when you do something, it's not comfortable the first time. And I hear a lot of that from my students as well, is that didn't feel comfortable. I didn't like that. Well, that's not always the case of being a good thing. It should feel different. If you're doing something out of the ordinary, which that's what practice is for, experimenting, things should feel different. They should feel awkward, and you're not going to get good at them, or they're not going to feel even comfortable until you practice them enough. And going through her book as well as, going back to the first 2 books, one thing that we've seen consistent book to book is
ball motion
and practice again. You have to get on the lanes, you have to put in the time. I think those are the people that do see significant change, are the people that practicing, but also what are they practicing?
Right. Well, it's being honest with yourself too. You don't want to just disregard something because it doesn't work. She puts that chart in there, and it's another tool in your tool belt, and you can then graph it accordingly as to when you're supposed to use that tool. Because kind of like you said, in a golf analogy, I'm not going to hit that driver when I'm next to the green trying to get it to fly over a bunker. Tools are important in the right situation and according to that situation. So maybe if you're practicing on that, and again, she talks a lot about results orientated, the actual outcome of it. If you're practicing that not in the right environment and that tool doesn't work, well, it's not meant for that environment. Maybe it's meant for a different environment. You bring that tool out somewhere else, but you got to categorize it. You got to log it accordingly as to where you should use it and when and why.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having tools is very, very, very important. I mean, we all have a ton of tools, but I think the key is, once again, if you're not practicing and trying these tools in practice or putting yourself in the environment that they're supposed to be in, I think you could be consistently using the wrong tools time to time.
And the tools aren't just the bowling balls.
Absolutely.
I think is the big point in here.
Whether it's your brain, your wrist, your feet, your legs, everything is a tool that you use.
She talks about it right in that first, start listing and charting all the different moves you can make and all the different things you can do. And I'm sitting there going, man, I think that would be a pretty long list.
And her list in here is pretty long.
Yeah, then how would I categorize it? And I think she did a good job in kind of painting that picture and that presence to then make you sit down and chart that out and then go, listen, I know an awful lot of stuff, and there's a lot of tools that I can use in order to get me to where I want to go based on this certain situation.
Yeah, and you know, I said the word a few minutes ago, but putting yourself in that same environment. You know, one example in particular is putting that particular pattern out or getting it broke down so you can play that pattern. Chris handed me a pattern a couple weeks ago that literally there was no oil, right of 20, but that allows you to almost practice over the gutter cap, because it's hard to break down that pattern and simulate that. So putting yourself and practicing in that environment, if you're constantly going to one house and practicing one thing and seeing one lane condition, you'll never know if some of these other tools can work or some of these other bowling balls, you know, can work.
And different modes too. She hit on that too, as far as league mode and tournament mode as well. I know I'm kind of a tinker. I came from, you know, being taught by Dave Bernhardt Sr., who tinkers with everything, as you know. And there's a difference if I go and I make let's say a pitch change or a grip change. She talked a little bit about, you know, using an oval grip in one finger and a lift in another, or just experimenting with different things like that. I know when I make that change and I bring that ball off the press and I walk down lane 1 at turbo and I throw the shots on lane 1 and 2 at turbo, it feels one way. But then when I get into that tournament mode and I start to feel that adrenaline, sometimes that feel becomes a little bit different. So there's league mode, there's tournament mode, there's practice mode. So again, you're taking all these tools into these different charted territories, and you want to know how your body reacts a little bit different. She gives us a ton of information, a lot of different ways to go about trying to combat certain situations. But she also does a very good job at using acronyms to bring it in. Things like laser, and then there was the NMW, no matter what, which I thought was pretty cool. So she gave me a lot, but then she gave me a lot of little acronyms for me to really remember them and kind of take heart.
What was laser? What was that?
Oh, laser was chapter 2. It's actually derived from
angle, rotation, speed, and equipment.
Yeah.
Lay down.
Yeah.
Well, it was originally, it didn't involve that, so it was just Acer.
Okay, you're right. Yeah.
Right, and then as bowling kind of
the lay down became more
important, which is something you and I talk about all the time.
Absolutely.
I thought, you know, last week I thought a lot about Brad in this book. This week I thought, you know, a lot about you, because she talked about lay down as being so important, not only left to right or east to west as she called it, but north to south as well. And one of the things my girls in high school hate me for that she talked a lot about, where did you slide? Where did you finish?
Sure.
She talked a lot about that. So she brings in a lot of points as far as understanding. She doesn't like that. She can't stand, I missed my target. Okay, well, there's still data points that you can take from that as to why you missed your target, as opposed to just saying, hey, I missed my target, end of story, let's move on. There are data points that we can take from that. If you were standing in a certain spot and you drift or whatever, you're supposed to finish on board X. Okay? If you didn't finish on board X, it's going to affect the angle in which the ball comes off your hand east to west, right? Which is now going to affect the desired target, not only at the arrows, but it's also going to affect it somewhere down the lane at the break point. Now, one of the things that you and I have been working on is your north to south, right? And we kind of did a little extra one. I don't know if you posted that, but we did the...
We will be soon, yeah.
Yeah, so as you guys know, we did the doubles tournament with me, Mike, Laura, and Allison, and we ran over Mike, and he was...
Had to bring up that again.
He was kind of upset afterwards as to why he didn't bowl so well, and it took me...
30 seconds.
30 seconds
Maybe
to
that's a little
fiddle.
long.
Literally. So what we just tried to do in that analogy was affect how your ball came off your hand north to south. And it's something that you and I have been working on.
Yeah, and one thing, and it's maybe more in the case for beginner bowlers or maybe at the high school level, but when people come into TurboTech, sometimes they say, I've been hitting my target. Well, as Chris said, I mean, you can hit, we'll take second arrow on the right side, you can hit second arrow, throw it in the right gutter, you can hit the same arrow and throw it in the left gutter.
She talks about that brilliantly as far as, you know,
Dr. Dean does that a little bit with our kids at Collegiate Expo, doesn't he? Kind of make them throw it into the gutter.
Yeah,
he wants them to throw it in the gutter, and they don't want to do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it forces them to kind of think a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a good segue that she talks about. Going back to chapter 1 too, is getting out there and experimenting. If you don't experiment things, you're no worse off as a player, after that's done. If it's not good,
what's the worst that could happen? The ball still comes back to you.
Yeah, you're the same player that you were before. You're no worse than you were before. So, taking a risk out there and I'll have people even come into TurboTech sometimes too and saying, yeah, I'm bowling really well. I don't really want to mess up anything. Well, A, why did you come in for a lesson? B, we need to keep growing.
Right. Well, yeah, too, and then again, it changes your perspective on going and practicing. Not all of us have the luxury of going to TurboTech in order to practice. So let's say you walk into the local bowling center up here at Imperial, and you're going to go and you want to put some practice time in. What's the first thing they ask you? How many games? Or, do you want an hour? Well, if most of the time you have to type your name in order to get the lane to turn on. So now it's keeping score. And as she talked about, even her, she had a difficult time thinking, what are people thinking about me in the back? So now if you're practicing...
What is your focus on?
Right, and you're not trying... Maybe you're actually working on something, but all of a sudden you have 39 as a game because you're trying to shoot 10 pins. People in the back may... So I think a little of that all kind of ties itself into one another. You want a quality practice. It's not about the outcome.
Sure.
You want to go there with a purpose. You want to work on something
they just put
specific.
It in practice mode, though?
Some places can, some places can't. I mean, every bowling center is a little bit different. But you always have to, nowadays, in most centers, you have to type in a letter or a name in order for the lane to turn itself on. It's in kind of like a power save
all the new software that they have nowadays. A lot of the
some are more advanced where you can set up certain things and whatnot. But the biggest thing is making sure going back, make sure you don't hit that reset button.
Right.
Because sometimes that'll also use your whole frame up too.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a lot of things into it, but again, I think she really gave me a different way to look at practice.
Say hi to Joe Kerjenke because he.
Joe Kerjenke, love your Facebook post, by the way. You are absolutely hilarious. Entertaining. Tough guy.
Yeah.
Doug Evans from Florida.
So I felt like this book, this was something I feel like we talk about an easy read. It was an easy read, but it wasn't real technical. Like it was just you could fly through it. It was I think it was just around 140 pages or so. It was very smooth to go ahead and read. Once again, I didn't feel like you had to read chapter to chapter once again either.
Lori jumped around a little bit. She went from one chapter to another. I can't get into that. I go from one all the way through. I think I'm going to miss something and then have to go back. So I'm still one that starts at the forward and reads the acknowledgments and then the introduction and then goes chapter 1.
We're going to do some trivia too.
On the way through.
So we could give away free copies of the book.
Free copies
She's
of the
got
book.
some trivia questions here on page 10, right at the end of beginning of chapter 2.
Oh yeah, I see those. Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to?
You go if you're there. Go ahead.
Okay.
So are you guys? Are you done on this subject?
Yeah,
of Susie's book.
Yeah. So
Chamber
again,
of Bowling Secrets.
Yeah, check out TurboGrips.com. Go to our website and download chapter 1. Read chapter 1, and then go to the shop section and pick up this book. It's a really easy read.
Yep.
Completely different than the book that we read. Not saying that last week was
good to have
a
a different
difficult
perspective.
read, right?
Yeah.
But Susie gave you a lot.
Say hi to Larry King from Massachusetts.
Hi, Larry.
Hello.
Susie gives us a lot of information. There's a lot of ways to make an adjustment, right? And there's not just one right answer or one wrong answer. It's not just that easy.
Correct.
If it
There
was,
never is.
right?
Yeah.
If it was, and we had that one answer, there would be people lined up, forever at TurboTech in order to come get a lesson because we have the answer, and that's kind of why it's the Chamber of Secrets. It's all kind of, an illusion, a feeling, kind of a sense of what do I need to do. It's not concrete. But if you have a chart, it's going to help you out a whole lot. So go to TurboGrips.com, download or check out chapter 1, go to the shop section, buy this book. It's really easy. It would be a great Christmas present for your high school kid, your high school bowler, even kids that are starting to get out. There's a few things that maybe, because she talks a lot about this board or that board, you may have to explain to maybe a beginner bowler, but it's a lot of information in a short amount of time.
It's good practice off the lanes.
Yes.
So.
Okay, so let's do some trivia. We're going to give away a free book. We got 3 questions here. And so I guess how we'll do it, because this is live, I guess we'll just take the first answer that shows up in our feed that's correct.
Sounds good.
The one that would.
Sounds good. That sounds fair.
We'll just mail it out to you.
Yep, absolutely.
when
we'll
we're
just
able, when we're able to do that?
I'll message you from our Facebook account to get your address. So.
Yep.
All right. So the first trivia question is, what's the highest score you can get without a mark? What is the highest score you can get without 1 mark?
That was good too, because I always ask my kids, what's the highest score you can get without throwing a strike?
And it definitely took me a minute or so to think about that, actually.
Yep.
So that's a tricky question though, because without a strike, but you could spare. You can
exactly.
Get, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So trivia question 1, if you missed it, what's the highest score you can get without a mark? First one to answer in the Facebook comments, we'll send you a copy of her book. Chris, you want to do question number 2?
Sure. Number 2, what's the minimum number of boards allowed on a lane?
That's kind of a weird question.
What's
isn't
the minimum number of boards allowed on a lane?
It's kind of a trick question, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good thing I got the answer right here.
Now you know.
It's a trick question, isn't it? All right, and the last one is, what is the minimum weight of a bowling ball?
And when you put that question in there, because it does, well, because they all involve numbers, so just put weight of a bowling ball, maybe with a pound sign or something.
There you go.
Yep.
So again, check this out, Facebook Live, check out our other social media websites.
Yep. We'll be back here next Thursday, hopefully.
Next Thursday with a new book. We'll look for your feedback. Give us a book that you recommend that you'd like us to read. Anything closing?
Nope, that's about it. So everyone stay healthy, stay safe.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. Make sure you keep up with us. I know Mike posted some of the YouTube channel up there, so if you get bored and you're looking for something to do, go check out our YouTube page. See you guys next week.